Welcome into another episode of Got Next with Meghan and Zora. We continue to wish Meghan well as her and JJ, her new son, get acclimated to a family of three. Joining us today to talk some hoops, my favorite person, LaChina Robinson. She's just thrilled. She's thrilled.
I bet you tell everyone that. My favorite person. Hey, Zora.
She really loves me. She just doesn't like to show it. I
do love you, and I do show it. Stop.
You do. No, you do. You're right. I'm honored that you're here. Seriously, it means a lot. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today to talk some hoops. And we're going to start with college basketball, a place that really means a lot to both of us, right? We both played, and you want to talk about high-level hoops. It's hard to start with anything but NC State and Notre Dame. I mean, that is a game that I think you could put on classics, right? In terms of watching over and over again. And I'm going to be honest, when I saw the matchup, I didn't necessarily, I don't think I predicted overtime, let alone double overtime. And that's exactly what we got. And I go back to regulation first, the shot making, yes, but the free throws by NC State, I mean, that takes a lot of mental toughness. So we'll go regulation and then overtime as a whole. What are your takeaways from the game?
Well, I mean, I feel like the themes that were impacting the game in regulation continued on through the two overtime. So I'm a little bit more big picture with it. But first and foremost, I just love the environment at NC State. I mean, I've played in that arena. I've called so many games there. Their women's basketball fans are the best. You know, what Kay Yao built and what Westmore is continuing was just jumping through the screen, right? So the environment felt like NCAA tournament level. It felt like there was a lot at stake in that game, which there was. I mean, Notre Dame could have left as the ACC regular season champs, but I have so much respect for Wes as a coach and also Neil Ivey. So I love the chess match of coaches going back and forth and the strategy. But what really headlined this game was the backcourt for both teams, obviously, right? Olivia Miles, Hannah Hidalgo, Sonia Citron on the Notre Dame side, and then Aziaha James, Zoe Brooks, Saniya Rivers. And at the end of the day, I think we all knew that the backcourt would have a final say on each team as to how this game ended up, and that was the case. But as far as the game going to overtime, Sonia Citron hitting that three was just insane. Like, it was one of the best shots I know I have seen in college basketball in recent years, with the amount of pressure that's on a shot like that. I mean, her team had to get a bucket to extend the game. It looked like a broken play. She was, pretty well defended in terms of having a defender somewhere in the vicinity and still knock down the shot. So I think that kind of set the tone for what we were going to see in the overtime and double overtime. But it was just a great game all the way around.
The game had me on my heels so much. I called the game yesterday, UCLA at Iowa, and that game started right as the first overtime was starting. And so with like 10 minutes before we're about to go on air, I have my iPad, I have the game on, and the producer's in my ear like, can you focus? But it was,
right.
It was a game that you couldn't take your eye off of. And yeah, you talk about that shot from Sonia Citron, who I think actually, there's so many performers. I think for NC State, it was Aziaha James that really stood out to me. And then for Notre Dame, it was Sonia Citron, because so many times with Notre Dame, you talk so much about Olivia Miles and Hannah Hidalgo, rightfully so, but Neil Ivey consistently says that Sonia Citron is her silent assassin. And she proved that yesterday. And the shot, like, it wasn't a heave, I mean, that was her form. That was a basketball shot, and a tough one at that extended the game 8 more minutes. And I love what you said about Coach Yao and Westmore and women's basketball just shining so bright. People that are no longer with us and people that still continue to move the game forward. That was the best of it yesterday. So, and I think it's a microcosm of this season as a whole. I mean, that was the number 1 ranked team in Notre Dame who went down. Now, there's a toss up to me. I mean, we're so used to maybe there being like a clear runner, especially heading into March. I don't know
Mhm.
your opinion on it, but right now there's maybe 5 or 6 teams that really have a shot to win it
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, the parity at the top is really impressive, and I know only because I remember there was a year when number 1 kept going down. I don't know if we've hit that record as the number of time that the number 1 team has been beat, obviously South Carolina, then UCLA, Notre Dame. But that just speaks to all the depth in terms of how many teams could vie for a national championship, right? And just the variety in that sense. But the one thing that these teams, I think, all have in common when you look at it, it comes down to guard play, and I say that as a very proud center slash forward because I did
Yeah,
have
did
a
that
high
hurt
jump
to
shot.
say?
Excuse me.
Did that hurt to say that it's all in
It
the
did
guard?
a little bit, and this is with all due respect to Lauren Betts because she could end up being the factor, I think, in all of this that ultimately trumps guard play in the NCAA tournament as the most dominant center in the country right now. But I think back to yesterday's game with NC State and Notre Dame, and like one thing about Wes Moore's teams is he's going to play great defense, and he is going to have a backcourt that can break you down one-on-one, right? All 3 positions. Zoe Brooks had 33 points. She was fantastic. Like the scoring by their guards in that second overtime was what Neil Ivy said was troubling for her on the defensive end for her team. And so when you have guards that can just get the ball, break you down, go one-on-one, that's those are the kind of plays that win you games in March and win you games to start into April for the Final Four. So at the end of the day, yes, yesterday was a microcosm of a sense in terms of, hey, number 1 goes down again. There's parity in women's basketball, but it also just reiterates how important guard play is when you start to talk championships.
And a number of those guards will be in the process of hopefully getting drafted in a few months. And it's hard to have you on any podcast and not talk WNBA. How do you see some of those skill sets transferring into the next level? It's no question for me, a number of them should have the opportunity to be high draft picks come a few months.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at starting with Notre Dame, obviously there's so much conversation around Olivia Miles and Sonia Citron. I mean, they could both end up being lottery picks, right? And what I think is most impressive for me is Sonia Citron probably doesn't get the attention that she deserves, but as a 6-foot wing, she has a complete skill set. She'll sell out on the defensive end. She's just silky smooth, good decision making across the board. Like you can see the writing on the wall that she's going to be a great pro, and you pretty much saw it coming in. But it's Olivia Miles' draft stock that has been most, I guess, the biggest headline for me. Coming off of an injury, you don't expect a player to be even better or add more dimensions. You just hope that they come off in that first year back and can be somewhat the same player. Most people say, when you have a significant injury, knee injury, whatever, it usually takes 2 years. And looking at Olivia Miles' draft profile prior to her injury, it was, oh my God, like game changer in terms of her passing ability, her playmaking. Like you could see so many different aspects, even her finishing at the rim. I think she's got a knack. She's very crafty finishing shots, but it's her overall comfort shooting the ball. Like at the WNBA level, you must be able to score, period, right? Like I think we have abandoned the days of being able to be a pass only point guard. Not to say that you can't be a pass first, but you got to be able to score. And I am just blown away by the amount of the amount of time that she's put into her shot and how she's improved herself as an asset on the offensive end. And in particular, because this could impact the number 1 spot, right? Most people, myself included, believe that Dallas is going to take Paige Beckers at 1. But you got to have a conversation about Olivia Miles because you just don't see a talent as unique as hers come across your desk every day in the WNBA. And that's a good problem to have, right? In making that decision. And obviously Paige is a great player, but it is interesting to get to this point of the year and say, well, are we really sure who number one is? And that has a lot to do with how Olivia Miles has improved her draft stock.
Yeah, 100%. And we were prepared to talk more draft, but then, our hometown team, the Washington Mystics, decided to go out and trade the lone member from the 2019 championship team, Ariel Atkins, headed to Chicago, and just one of a flurry of moves made. But what was your overall reaction when that news came down?
My reaction is that Chicago is really valuing experience. And I understand that, right? While it's obvious that Washington is getting ready to go through a major rebuild, it's seeming as though Chicago doesn't want to go that far back in terms of what they're trying to build with their team. And they want to start with some players that have experience. When you look at their core, and I have all the respect for Ariel Atkins. I mean, I think she's like a 2-time All-Star, 5-time All-Defensive Team, probably a player that hasn't gotten as much credit as she deserves, a lot because Washington has been so up and down over the last, few years or so. But they have Camila Cardozo and Angel Reese in the middle. And if you're smart, you build around those players, right? They're premier talents. They've got championship pedigree, obviously achieving at a high level in college. And so bringing Courtney Vandersloot back into the mix for what is probably her swan song, right, gives you some experience at the point guard spot. I thought Lindsay Allen did a fantastic job in that, and great for Connecticut to get her at the point. But you still need some experience with the youth on the interior to accommodate that and to complement it. And so I think Ariel Atkins absolutely does that. She shot 36% from 3 last year. Chicago needs someone that can spread the floor around their bigs. I also like the addition of Rebecca Allen to this team. I think she can fit in at the wing, give you a little bit more size. I think Ariel Atkins is like 5'10", obviously. Vandersloot's a little smaller guard, but also Michaela Onyenwere, who had an excellent season last year. And I thought took big steps forward at the forward position, who gives you some versatility. But again, it's that championship pedigree, Atkins having won with Washington in 2019, and that experience that it was very clear to me Chicago was prioritizing. And Washington is in a rebuild, Sydney Johnson and Jamila Wideman have their work cut out for them. I think the Elena Delle Donne situation has kind of handcuffed Washington a little bit over the years in terms of what they can do roster wise, but now they've got lots of picks to work with, and I'll be intrigued to see how they support Aliyah Edwards, Brittany Sykes, Shakira Austin, who I think is a tremendously talented young core.
Yeah. And what do you think about the draft component of that trade, where now Chicago gives up the third pick to DC? And that's what you were raising the point of. They're prioritizing experience over the unknown of a player that you just draft.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, and they gave up more than the third pick. I think there's some swapping in the next couple of rounds that's possible. I think they gave up a lot. I'm not too worried about the swap because if things end up the way they're supposed to, Washington will have a higher pick anyway, because they probably are going to be more in a rebuild in the next couple of years. But it would have been nice if Chicago could have kept some more of their draft capital and maybe just gave up the number 3 pick and that be it. But at the end of the day, they got what they wanted in Ariel Atkins. And I think she's a tremendous young woman. She's super low maintenance, coachable, a leader. She's done things the right way in her career. And I just think she's going to add a ton of value to what Chicago's building.
Yeah. 100%. The W has been no short of entertaining in its off season. And what I love too, and I think you'll echo this, is all the basketball that we've been able to watch professionally this winter. And I'm talking about like Athletes Unlimited and Unrivaled. It's been competitive basketball, fun basketball. I particularly love the one-on-one competition that Unrivaled did. The men should take notes. They should take notes on a lot of things. And so shout out to all of that. On Got Next, we have a couple segments that we do every episode. So one of our segments is our On Her Turf segment. For those that are not aware, On Her Turf is NBC's women's empowerment brand. And we've gotten the chance to talk to Lauren Betts, and we've asked her about who she's looked up to, right, as she's coming up and trying to improve. And she mentioned one of everyone's favorite WNBA players, of course, the South Carolina graduate. We even asked Juju Watkins who she pours into and who she talks to a lot. So before we get into that, let's hear from Lauren Betts on her favorite WNBA player.
Some players that you looked up to growing up that you tried to model your game after.
I always say growing up, my favorite player to watch was Aliyah Boston. She's just a baller. I mean, like, I think the amount of attention she got as a post, like, I just looked up to that so much because posts really don't get recognized that much in the game, and I think that she just is a great example of like someone I want to look like and play like. And I mean, she's just an amazing person as well. But I mean, her game, she's just so strong, and like her skill set is just like amazing. And I remember in high school just always watching her, even honestly, crazy story, but my first ever 3-on-3 game, I played against her, and I was like in middle school, and I was like a little lanky, like very uncoordinated player. And I remember playing against her for the first time, and I was like, who is this? Because she absolutely bodied me like first play of the game. But and then after that, I just continued to watch her, and she's just been a great example. So
I think it's always fascinating to hear your favorite players. What did you think when Lauren, we've covered Lauren, and she told us about that in person, when she just beamed talking about Aliyah Boston and how Aliyah sets an example for how posts can be the stars, and how they should get more recognition.
Yeah, I just enjoy the connection between the college game and the WNBA. For many years, you wouldn't believe this, Zora, because there's no way that it was you and I in these seats. But you would ask college players about the WNBA, and they're like, "Oh, I don't really watch the WNBA, or I watch more NBA." And as the growth, the popularity, the connection between the two leagues has started to take form, we're seeing these relationships, and I think some of it is born of the opportunities we're seeing in the brand space, right? So now you see college players are signed to, different apparel or sneaker companies, and there are also WNBA players that are involved in those companies. We also see programs like Kelsey Plum's Plum Dog Camp, where some WNBA players get to interact with younger players. So you have those different camps and chances for them to cross paths. But I also just think from a marketing standpoint, both colleges and universities and WNBA has done a better job of forging those relationships. So you'll see during WNBA season, that some of the college teams will tweet if their players are coming in town to play, or they'll be somewhere close, or they had a big game, and vice versa. And it makes sense because WNBA feeds into college, and college feeds into WNBA, for all of us to just make it one big women's basketball space. But having that vision of a player that you can aspire to be like, that you see value in, that you admire, that you feel like is a role model as a younger player, is everything. Like, that gives Lauren Betts a vision for what she can be. I think Aliyah Boston is a fantastic role model, both on and off the court. And it's something that just really warms my heart that these women have those examples, and they're more visible, and we can see them now because of the growing visibility of the league overall.
Yeah, some other connections that have popped up. You asked Juju Watkins about who she talks to the most, and she said Jewel Lloyd, which I thought that was an interesting answer, and there's some agency connection there. Kiki Iriafen, to me, and actually I would love to know your thoughts on this. Her game reminds me a lot of Asia's, and she says she does see Asia in herself, and they got to meet this past summer, and that meant a lot to her.
Well,
But Asia's everybody's role model, right? Like,
I was gonna say, you look at role model in the dictionary, she's there. You know what I actually love about that connection more so than on the court is how similar they are off the court. And what I mean by that is, Zora, that conversation with us with Kiki, I mean, she was so sharp and just on top of her game, like understands who she is, what she stands for, what she's aspired to be, how her life has impacted her journey. Like literally was just coming with all the information and was brilliant. And I feel the same way when I'm talking to Asia. Like when I'm talking to A'ja Wilson, I feel like I got to step up my game in terms of just my overall IQ, how I see things, broadening my perspective, because she's really, really smart, like a thought leader, in my opinion. And so that's the aspect of the two of them that I made a connection with. I was like, wow, they are both just sound bites waiting to happen. And so, yeah, I love that she brought up A'ja Wilson.
I think that is so poignant and so on par, talking about the intellectual piece of all of it. The last connection that I will bring up is Chelsea Gray and Olivia Miles. Game respects game. Olivia Miles will be quick to tell you that the point guard is at the top of her list.
Yeah, I mean, that tweet says that Chelsea Gray said she was going to try the transition between the leg bounce pass. Anytime you have Chelsea Gray saying she's going to try something that you have executed on the court, you're doing something right. But no, the fanfare that these two players bring to the game of women's basketball is my favorite. Like there is no one, at least in my time covering the league, with her passing, that has wooed me the way that Chelsea Gray has. I mean, she's phenomenal. And then you see that in Olivia Miles. There was a clip somewhere of Candace Parker talking about Olivia Miles, and she knows because she played with Chelsea Gray and, won a championship on the court with her in LA. But I just love that we still have that flair. Like it goes back to the Tisha Penicheros of the world, and Sue Bird had a little bit of that, and Lizzie Whalen had some of that. But the highlights that those two players are going to make on the court for however long they're playing the game just gives me chills to just think about. So that's an epic link up right there.
100%. And I watched that Candace Parker interview, and she was talking about, she's high on Olivia Miles, and she was talking about how W ready Olivia Miles is. Not that, anyone doesn't believe that, but it's always great to hear it from one of the GOATs like Candace Parker. The last thing that we want to touch on today is we want to just give a shout out to our producer, Natalie, who has been everywhere between the Super Bowl and NBA All-Star. And she's gone to these big tentpole events, which LaChina, I know you've been at too. You're at Super Bowl week down in New Orleans, but she's going and she's asking major male superstars about their favorite female athletes. And I know there's a lot of people in the media space that do that, but I just wanted to give a shout out for our Got Next segment to our producer. She went and asked Jayson Tatum about his hopes to bring a WNBA. Okay, so we're going to bring up all of the potential expansion teams.
I'm glad you said all the potential, because this list is getting out of hand. Okay, the list has gotten out of control. Everybody's putting their name in the hat all of a sudden, which is great that there's this level of interest. But I'm like, whoa, how many teams do y'all think about to pop out? Like, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I am a firm believer in taking care of the teams that are established. That's just my thought on it. And then, Steph Curry, Malaysia Fulwiley from South Carolina is signed with Steph's brand at Under Armour, right? And him talking about why that made sense for him to do. She also was in New Orleans. She asked Jalen Hurts about his all-female management team, who happens to be very similar to the team that you work with. So it's, I think it's great what Natalie is doing and how much she pours into women's basketball and women's sports as a whole. Anything, LaChina, that you want to leave us with? I'm really glad we got to do this.
I am too. I know. Well, first of all, I want to chime in and just echo your sentiments that I think Natalie does fantastic work. I have run into her on a number of occasions, including at the Super Bowl, where she was doing interviews on the purple carpet at the Sports Power Brunch. But she is just grinding and really working incredibly hard to bring us great coverage. I know around WNBA, I don't really follow a lot of other sports, especially men's sports, as much, but I did happen to see her interview with Steph Curry, and I thought it was a fantastic question about representation with Full Wiley. But so I do want to say shout out to Natalie. But is there anything else? No, Zora, I guess just for you, how you feeling? Like, you got the twins, like, bring us up to speed. Give us some news. What's going on?
We have no news, but no news is good news in my world right now. We're doing well. I cover the Big Ten a lot. I'm really enjoying this league. And I've covered a lot of USC, so I've gotten to talk a lot with Lindsay Gottlieb. And I just appreciate her perspective on the game. And she's just always it's so much bigger than basketball for her too. And what I appreciate, I've gotten to cover USC and UCLA. What I appreciate both about Lindsay Gottlieb and Cori Close is they want nothing more than the greater good for the game.
Yeah.
And that is so important in the midst of heavy competition, right? Like, especially those two teams, Battle of LA, they go at it, but they're always going to complement each other on what they do to grow the game.
Oh, goodness. I mean, if anything, because, I cover the Big Ten as well. And I used to cover the Big Ten back in the day for the Big Ten Network, but coaches make the experience for us. Like, that is just my opinion about this journey, is like, when you get to cover great coaches, which there are so many of them in the Big Ten, it makes your job, to your point.
Yeah.
Cori Close understanding the big picture, Lindsay Gottlieb. I'll be honest with you, Kim Barnes-Arico is probably one of my favorite coaches ever. Now, I covered her back in her St. John's days before she came to Michigan, but she's a pioneer of the game. Carolyn Keeger you just give her a little bit more time. Covered her teams at Marquette. They were fantastic. She is just so fiery and passionate about the game. Coquise Washington is brilliant in the way she approaches and mentors women. So, I that's the part of it that I love and enjoy more than anything is the coaches. So I agree with you. I think the Big Ten has got some of the best, and they got great crowds too. Maryland, Brenda Freeze, we were there.
Great crowd. The Iowa crowd is serious. Was just there the other day. Yeah, Indiana always draws great. Shout out to Terry Morin. Yes,
which I will say, because of everything we're talking about, and obviously Iowa has been so good the last couple of years or whatever, but when you look at how Maryland has really been running the show in the Big Ten since they joined the league, it makes it hard to believe because of all the great coaches and everything we just talked about. And I know it's changed a little bit now, adding, a couple what was Pac-12 teams, etc. But it just kind of really puts Brenda in a different conversation, because she came from dominating the ACC to dominate the Big Ten. And I know it's been a little bit touch and go the last few years, but I just wanted to say that, because when I look back at like the championships over time, regular season, tournament, I'm like, Brenda been doing it.
Yeah. So much of the Big Ten has run through College Park. Yeah. So I wanted to that was what was on the top of my mind, talking to all these coaches, them making time and pouring and not just having basketball conversations, but I can take some of it away for life too. So I appreciate them. I appreciate you. Thank you. I know you're busy. Forgot Next with Meghan and Zora. I'm Zora. Meghan is off being a mom, and she's LaChina Robinson. Thanks for hanging.
Congratulations, Meghan and Zora. Woo woo.